Well, good morning, everybody, and happy November weekend. Man, November. You're listening to the Repco Light Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And this November weekend, I'm not terribly thrilled that it's November, but I'm thrilled about what I've got on the show. On this weekend, I've got a really kind of a weird mix of different topics. We're going to be talking about art in the bathroom. Turns out that's a controversial topic. Who knew? We'll talk about what you need to know so you can bring art, real art into your bathroom, not just plaques with witty bathroom sayings on them, but real art. We're going to get to that. I'm also going to be talking about raised bed gardening. Fall's the perfect time to start getting things ready with an eye on next spring. So I've got info. I've got money-saving wisdom. Wisdom. Let's just say tips. I've got money-saving tips. Wisdom might be trying too hard. So we've got that coming, and I'm also going to be talking about masking tape and when you can use masking tape or should use it, and then to sweeten the deal, when maybe you can skip it on a project. So all of that's coming up. But right now, let's talk about something that happened a long time ago when my kids were little. We were all talking about it the other day and reminiscing, and I remembered this experience that I had with Andrew. At the time, he was about 5, so keep that in mind. Anyway, I was in the living room, as best I can remember. I'm filling in some gaps along the way, but I was in the living room watching something on TV, and the kids were just going nuts. It was nearing bedtime, and that's usually when their second wind always kicked in. Well, you can only tolerate the jumping and the thumping and the hollering and the shouting just so long, and I hit my breaking point. So I stood up, put my hands on my hips, and I said, okay, bedtime, time to brush your teeth. Now, I remember Caleb laughed at that. It's been an ongoing thing. He pointed at me and pointed out to everybody that I was doing my Superman pose again. Right, standing there with my hands on my hips. Everybody laughed. It took away from my authority, but he was right. There I am, standing there just like Superman. Well, I got them to go to the bathroom. So they hopped and jumped all their way there, and, all 5 of them, shaking the whole stinking house like a herd of small, domestic beasts moving through. They made their way to the bathroom. I listened to make sure that my bidding was being done. And when I heard the sound of the running water, I started to go back to the living room. And then I heard something that I couldn't believe. I heard Andrew, in confidential and extremely boastful tones, say the following: "Hey, everybody, don't do it. I haven't brushed my teeth in 4 days." So I heard him say that. Then I heard Caleb respond with, "Wow, how do you get away with it?" And then I heard Andrew say, "I fake it." Well, at that point, I'd heard enough. The last thing I need with 5 kids is for Andrew to start promulgating some gospel of dental neglect. Last thing I need is that. I stomped into the room, stood with my feet shoulder length apart. I straightened my back, puffed out my chest, put my hands on my hips, and said, "Andrew, you're going to brush your teeth at least twice every single day, or you're going to pay your own dental bills." Well, Andrew looked crestfallen for a minute, but then Caleb, of course, starts laughing again, points out that I'm standing there like Superman. Superman spoken, do as he says. Well, that was actually pretty funny. So we kind of let the thing diffuse a little bit. But seriously, I remember wondering about Andrew. Why in the world would you fake brushing your teeth for 4 days? He said it was to save time, but wow. Who would ignore such a simple thing, especially when ignoring that project, that simple little project, if you want to call it that, is going to lead to expensive and painful work down the road? Who would do that? And that brings me to the paint point, or the home improvement point, or whatever you want to call it. I've been doing almost exactly that same thing as Andrew for years, with almost exactly the same consequences. See, there are all sorts of little projects around my home. A ceiling that needs painting, bathroom cupboards that need to be touched up, a ding in the back entry wall that should be spackled and painted. I've got all kinds of little projects. Some are bigger than others, but most are really just 10 and 15-minute jobs. In the grand scheme of things, they're going to take no time at all. They cost almost nothing to fix. They don't require lots of expertise or special equipment, anything like that. And yet I routinely ignore them. I do. I don't know why. I wish I knew why. I wish I could understand myself. Physician, heal thyself. I have no idea. In fact, the thing is, I don't just ignore them. I actively avoid them. I look away from them. I avert my eyes when I'm in those rooms. I don't want to take the time to do these little fixes, and I keep telling myself it's not a big deal. I'll get to it later, right? I've got other things to do, bigger fish to fry. But the problem with many of these little things is that failure to act now only causes bigger problems later, just like Andrew and his teeth. I'm saving some time now, but I'm going to pay the piper later. The best example that I've got of this, the most heartbreaking one, was a peeling edge on wallpaper in the dining room of my old house. The spot I needed to fix, 3 inches long, and it was along a seam. It was nothing. A little bit of paper had peeled back. It literally wouldn't have taken any time or money at all. Just a little dab of paste or some glue, some safe release tape to hold it down, and the whole thing would have looked new. I left it. I ignored it. I didn't do it. I was always going to do it a little bit later. Well, Tessa beat me to it. When she was learning to walk, the little bugger went and found that section at her eye level. And, one thing leads to another. And before long, she's peeled it all back. And she's created this problem that was huge. It took so much longer to fix. And on top of it all, the fix that I could come up with at that point wasn't nearly as good as it would have been earlier, had I taken care of it. If I'd have glued it down, she never would have peeled it up in the first place. So anyway, that's me. What's your situation? Do you have little projects at home like I do? Easy, quick projects that you kind of keep ignoring or avoiding? Well, maybe it's time for all of us to tackle them. Maybe it's time to cross them off your list. Maybe it's time for me to cross them off my list and deal with them on a more regular basis before they become bigger, more expensive problems down the road. Now is better than later. It's a lot less painful. All right, that's the pain point for the week. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're talking about masking tape. So please stay there. Please don't go anywhere. I'll make it interesting, I promise. Stick around. Masking tape. Masking tape. Those words, boy, they just sound musical in your ears, don't they? I mean, this is going to be a great, exciting, fun topic when you hear masking tape. It'll be the first thing that comes from my mouth as we come back from the break. You're listening to the Repco Light Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And sometimes, some segments, some days, I feel like I should lead the show or lead each segment with an apology. I know it's early in the morning and it's the weekend, and I wish I could think of a more exciting name for the segment than masking tape. I'm so bad at that. I mean, man, I've lost half the audience already. But don't leave yet. It's going to be good. I've got basically what I'm going to do. I'm trying to think what I've got here. I've got a segment that's going to talk about when you should consider using masking tape on your projects and which projects you really could consider skipping the masking tape. So it's not just masking tape that we're talking about. We're talking about saving time, saving money perhaps, and getting great results. All of those things rolled into one. And we're just keeping the focus on masking tape. So let's start right off the bat with when are some places where you could consider skipping masking tape on your project. Well, first off, if you or the crew doing the work are good with a paintbrush, you can cut in neatly, cleanly, and with skill. Well, if that's the case, you might be able to pass on the tape entirely. Some painters do. In fact, a lot of established painters scoff, literally scoff. It's old school. They're scoffing pretty hard at the idea of using tape at all. If you listen right now, you probably can hear them scoffing out there, in the wild at the idea of using masking tape. A lot of established painters just don't use tons of it. And that's great. For you, your skill level. If it's just you doing the work in your home, or if you've got a skilled team on board, or the people that are doing the work with you, they really know what they're doing, it's possible to go without it and still have great results. So first off, and most obviously, using it or not using it, it really depends on your skill level. So that's the first thing. If you guys are good, you can skip it. Another place where you might be able to skip masking tape is when we're talking about that line where the wall meets the ceiling. Skip the tape there. It's honestly an area where taping can sometimes do more harm than good. ceilings, especially textured ones, they can be really tricky, if not impossible, to tape cleanly. I mean, it's bumpy, for heaven's sake. So yeah, it's not going to be a clean paint job up there. But even though that's the case, having the tape up there, because there are people who will go and you just take insane amounts of time to apply tape to that area over all the bumps. I've seen it. And when they do that, it gives them this false sense of security. You know, you think you're safe, so you slather on the paint up there like you're, putting jelly on a bagel, and then you peel the tape back and you discover this obscene amounts of paint that's bled through onto the ceiling. So that's just not the place to tape. So skip the taping there. Practice good cutting in techniques, which we'll talk about in future episodes in the month. And if you do that, you're going to be able to get really good results on that edge, where the wall meets the ceiling. You're going to get good results just doing it by hand if you do some practice ahead of time. People don't usually scrutinize that cut-in line anyway. It's way up at the top of the room. And even if you get a little bit of a tiny wave in that line, it's barely going to be noticeable from below. And if anybody does notice it, it just gives it that hand-painted look, right? That's what you tell them. All right, so skip taping up there. A third place that you can consider skipping the taping is perhaps around windows and doors, the casing around windows and doors. If you've got some painting experience, I think that's a great spot to practice those freehand skills. And I think that's largely the case because of the angle in which you're working. For the side casing on the windows, let's say, you can stand up and work top to bottom. And for me, moving my arm in that top to bottom, up and down fashion is just much more fluid than a side to side motion on a baseboard. And I'm able to get a nice smoother line, a longer cut line doing that. So that area is a great place to start. And another thing, another reason I think that's a great place to practice those skills is that standing up to paint the side casing around a window or a door, it's just a way more comfortable position than working on the floor, hunched over, trying to cut in around the base. Last of all, cutting in the casing beneath the window and above the window or door is just another great place to develop your freehand skills because in most situations, those lines above the door, above the casing, above the door, and below the window casing, most of those lines aren't even going to be really visible. They're too low or too high for most people to really even see them or pay attention to them. If you've got people who are scoping those lines out, those people don't need to be in your home, right? They can be shown the door and you can feel just fine about that. You weren't rude. They started looking at stuff they didn't need to be putting their nose into. So nobody's going to notice those lines. Just maybe save yourself some time doing the taping around all those areas and just freehand those. Get your practice in that way. All right? Those are some areas you might want to consider skipping the tape. Now let's look at the other side of things. When is it worth using tape? Well, if you're working with people, remember the first reason that we gave or the first place that we gave where you could skip the taping. We talked about, if everybody on the job site is skilled, you could probably skip it. Well, this is the reverse of that. If you're working with people who don't have a ton of experience, DIYers, family members lending a hand, maybe new crew members on a job site if you're a contractor, in all of those situations, taping really can be a lifesaver. It takes a bit of time up front, but it's going to save a ton of time, save you a ton of time from touch-ups and a lot of headaches down the road. Taping can help with quality control if you're running a crew, and for DIYers, taping can make your work look professionally done, and it can help you get there much more quickly. Now, I'm going to post a link to a video that I ran into. I'll put it in the show notes, but it was a demonstration that was really kind of helpful. The guy making it is a handyman. He paints more than DIYers do, but way less than contractors, so keep that in mind. He was working in a room with two identical walls opposite each other. He decided to cut in the baseboard freehand on one wall and then tape and brush the cut in on the other wall. He wanted to see, which one took longer, which one was faster. Well, he had practiced his freehand work beforehand and was comfortable doing it, and yet in the end, cutting in the wall freehand took more than twice the time it took him to paint and tape the wall. And he had better results with the tape section. Now, that's anecdotal. That's his experience. It won't be the same for everybody, but it is interesting. If you're not a professional painter, it's pretty likely that the tape's going to help you get better results more quickly. All right, moving on. Also, consider taping if there's a massive amount of cut-in work. I recently heard from a contractor who had to cut around a 3-tiered tray ceiling, crown molding on each level, if you can imagine that. First off, he was going to just freehand the job like he typically would have done. But when he was looking at it and he considered all the different trips he was going to be making around the room trying to get straight lines on all of them, he decided he's just going to tape everything. So it took him about 2.5 hours to get all the tape up, but it paid off because he could blaze around the room and he ended up with perfect lines. In the end, he estimated that he saved time and painted with less stress because he was using the tape. So if you've got a lot of cut-in work to do, might want to go to tape, might just save you some time, even if you're a professional contractor. Maybe. Who knows? Another scenario where taping would probably help is when you're painting your walls and the baseboards are already done. You know, you're not doing the baseboards. Maybe the color was good. You're not changing that, just changing the wall color. If that's the case, taping the top edge of those baseboards is going to help you get that sharp, crisp line that you want. And when you do that taping, use a wider tape, maybe 1.5 inches. That's probably ideal. And only press down that edge that sits on top of the base. That way the tape is going to help keep roller spatter off of the baseboard as well. So kind of a bonus there. It'll get you that straight line and keep that spatter off the base. Similarly, maybe you're only painting the baseboards, but you're leaving the wall alone. Just changing that baseboard color. You love the wall color, need a new color on the base. If that's the case, I'd probably still consider taping along the wall where it meets the baseboard. Again, it's just going to help you get that clean edge easier and quicker. All right, that's about it. I could keep going, but that's enough. That's plenty. Here are our last few things, I guess, to think about before we move on to other fields, other topics. Painting without tape is a skill. There's a lot of pride in it, and a lot of pros work hard to develop it. And even if you're a DIYer, it's worth practicing in areas, around the house when you're working on your projects, on parts of those projects where it makes sense and where you're comfortable. Practice getting these skills and developing these skills. It feels great. Nothing really feels better than running your brush along, the window casing or something without having taped anything and still getting a nice, clean, crisp line. Feels great. A lot of people are impressed, the people in your family, as much as they can ever be impressed with stuff we do, but it's one of our best shots at it, at least when it comes to a skilled trade that we've picked up. They'll be blown away that you can do it. Take pictures, put them on social media, work to develop that skill. It's worth it. But don't let that pursuit of excellence there convince you to ditch tape altogether. Tape can be a huge help, even for the pros. There are tons of instances where good tape, applied correctly, can speed up the process. It can help you produce consistent quality work, even if the painting crew isn't as experienced as you prefer. Now, another thing to keep in mind if you're a DIYer is that tape isn't the place to try to save a lot of money on your project. For most average DIY projects, you're probably needing 1 to 2 rolls of tape. Skipping it might save you a grand total of $5 to $20, depending on the tape that you buy. But those savings really aren't worth it if you end up with poor results. High quality tape is going to give you sharper lines, less bleed through, and just overall a more professional finish. And using tape when you're not as proficient at painting as you'd like to be is really going to help you get those great results faster. I've said that a couple times, but that's the big takeaway here. You're just going to get those great results faster. Finally, speaking of tape, last thing, a little heads up for everybody. We've got Scotch Blue Painter's Tape on sale for $5.50 a roll all of this month at Repcolite. It's a step up if you're used to lower quality tapes, and if you're a contractor, this might be cheaper than what you're paying now. So grab a roll or two next time you're in, or stock up. Maybe you just want to have boatloads of this stuff in case there's an apocalypse. Who knows? The tape might come in handy. The deal goes all the way through the end of the month at all Repcolite stores, so definitely take advantage of that. All right, enough about tape for now. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, I've got tips for a fun, family-friendly fall project that's perfect for getting into raised bed gardening before the winter sets in. All of that's next. Stick around. And we're back. You're listening to the Repcolite Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And I'm pumped about this next segment. Ugh. I wish language was easier. I just wish it wasn't always putting up such a fight. Anyway, I'm excited for this next segment. We're going to be diving into a project that's simple, yet rewarding. I love it that it's simple. I love it even more that it's rewarding. And best of all, it's perfect for fall. Raised bed gardening. Now this spring, if you listen to the show on a regular basis, if you're one of the true believers out there, you know that my family, the Hansen clan, we jumped into our first raised bed gardening experience. We built one on a whim back in April, I think it was. And at the time, I knew it would have been better for me to have started in the previous fall or to wait, for right now to get started. But once spring hit and the weather was starting to turn, my daughter Tessa was really chomping at the bit to do some gardening, and she was adamant that she wanted to try raised bed gardening. And so I figured, what the heck, why not? Let's jump in and give it a try. And so we did. And the whole thing went crazy. We planted way too many tomatoes, way too many tomato plants. We expected only a few to survive. That's been our previous experience. We plant a bunch of stuff. There's a mass extinction event, it feels like. Everything we planted dies. Then we go to the store and buy packaged tomatoes. That's normally how it goes. So we bought and planted a ton of these plants, thinking maybe one or two will make it. Well, turns out they all made it. They all thrived. It was literally insane. It's like a jungle out there. We had tomatoes coming out of our ears. Really, like out of our ears. It was that insane. I'd come home from work and the entire kitchen counter would be full of tomatoes every single night. We'd chop them up. We'd turn them into salsa, chili, spaghetti sauce, pizza sauce, homemade tomato soups. We'd do that all the time. And then the next day, bloop, there they are, all over the counter again, trying to take over the kitchen. Crazy fun, but man, what a lot of tomatoes. We loved going out there. Every night we'd get home and we wouldn't go as a group. We're not that family. Sometimes we did go as a group, I can't lie. But most of the time we'd each kind of wander out there on our own to take a look. What's coming up? What's getting close to being ready? Oh, this is ready. All of that. Really, really fun. Really, really fun. So, raised bed gardening. If you've ever thought about gardening, but for one reason or another, you haven't jumped in, this is a really small scale way to do it and have a lot of fun. You got to think about it. In the time that we've got left, I want to share a few pointers, some things that I learned during my raised bed gardening experience, because I've done it for a year now. That pretty much makes me a grizzled veteran farmer. I've seen things. I put grass in my mouth and chew on it like farmers do. I've got stories. So let's start with why raised bed gardening is so great and why you out there listening need to try it. Now, first off, if you do it, you can garden anywhere. Well, within reason, but you can garden anywhere on your property. Even if you don't have great soil or much space, you can always put a raised bed garden on a patio. You can put it on gravel. You can put it on less than ideal garden soil. You can pretty much garden anywhere with a raised bed garden. Second, you control the quality of the soil. My yard soil isn't fantastic. It's pretty bad, which is why we have those mass extinction events. But since I filled the raised bed with high quality soil, we had incredible results. The tomatoes alone were more productive than any previous year. We never saw that success coming. So that's two reasons. The third reason, it's easier to reach. It's just easier to work this thing than a regular garden bed. Since it's raised, weeding and harvesting, they're just a lot more comfortable. If you're not big into bending over and walking around all hunched, this is great. You just kneel by the side of the bed and you can comfortably work the whole thing. It's amazing. All right. If this sounds like something you'd like to try, and hopefully we're getting there, maybe I hooked you a little bit. Maybe I'm hooking you a little more. If you're thinking about, I might want to try this, all you need to do is find a good sunny spot on your yard and then build or buy that box or that raised bed. And really, when it comes to that, that part of things, there are a ton of different ways you could go here. Lots of plans online, lots of instructions. There's not a lot of variance to what these things look like, but, there are little tweaks that you can do. I'm not going to walk you through the whole building process and just laying it out step by step. It's not easy to do that on the radio. Even for someone with my, firm grip on the English language, still do struggle. I can't imagine trying to explain, take the leftmost board, and then affix the end to the end of, the flanking board. And make sure you use all-weather fasteners and stuff like that. I don't want to explain it. You don't want to listen to it. It's not a complicated process. I did it in about 20 minutes. All you need is some wood, some exterior-grade screws, and soil for the bed. Just picture a 4x8, 4 foot by 8 foot frame made with 2x10s or stacked 2x8s to get it up to about 16 inches high. Picture that. You've got the idea. If you do need more info, just do a little Googling. YouTube has so many things out there. You can watch people build them till the cows come home. So do that. Go to Google, go to YouTube. I'll put a couple links of my favorite how-to videos in the show notes if you want to see those. Just go to repcolite.com, click the On the Radio tab on the homepage, and then you'll find the latest episode, and the links will be right there. Now, if you'd rather skip building, maybe that's not your thing. Maybe you're a point and payer, or you just want to buy it and put it on your property and be ready to go. Well, you can buy, pre-made raised beds, or you could even use a large galvanized stock tank. I've seen plenty of that. Just remember, if you do go that route, you've got to drill drainage holes in the bottom of those tanks. If you don't, it's not going to be the best experience. Drill drainage holes. Stock tanks are going to last for years. They're going to eliminate bending almost entirely because they're so much taller, but they are going to require a ton more soil to fill. So keep that in mind, and that's going to add to the cost. We'll talk about a quick workaround to save you some cash on soil in a bit. But first, if you're maybe thinking about building it and you're going to go with, just build it out of wood, we do need to talk about wood very briefly. There's a number of options, of course, that you could use. Cedar or redwood, those would be great. Cedar is kind of the gold standard, but both are naturally rot resistant. They'll last years and years and years, but they're pricey. Cedar's easier to find. Redwood's going to be a little harder to locate and get a hold of, but both would work really well if you could pull that off. Pine, it's a less expensive option, but it's not going to last nearly as long. I, of course, went with pine for mine. I know it's not going to last. I know that I'm going to have to rebuild it down the road, but the initial buy-in was so much easier, so much more inexpensive, so I went with that. Now, what about treated lumber? There's a lot that we could say about this, but I'm going to just simplify it for the sake of time. While treated lumber is rot resistant, it's not always safe for food gardens. Not always safe. Some may be, but some, treated woods are not going to be safe. So do your research if you're considering this option for a food garden, a raised bed that's going to grow food. So keep that in mind. All right. Now let's talk in the last little bit that we've got about filling the bed with soil, because this is where things can get a little costly. And surprisingly, I did not expect this, but filling that raised bed with soil was not cheap. For a 4x8 bed that was around 15 inches deep, that's what I had, I ended up spending, I would have spent close to about $150 or more on soil. But there is a cost-effective method that will help you reduce that. It's called, and it's a crazy word, it's called hugelkultur. 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 I don't know how to say it. Hugelkultur. Another way to talk about it is lasagna layering. I get that. Lasagna, that's my love language. So lasagna layering, that's what I did. And here's how it works. Basically, you break that garden bed, that raised bed, into multiple layers. Lasagna layering, right? The base layer, you start by filling the bottom with rotting logs, branches, sticks from your yard, things like that. These things take up space. They create a great moisture-holding foundation as they decompose. And yeah, they just eat up a lot of that extra space that you're not just, filling with soil. So base layer, rotting logs, branches, sticks, things like that. Intermediate layer, the next layer of your garden lasagna, you're going to add grass clippings, leaves, kitchen scraps, things like that. These are going to enrich the soil as they break down. Now, for the top layer of your lasagna, the mozzarella cheese and all that, the money layer, for that top layer, you're going to want to have about 8 to 12 inches of a high-quality garden mix soil. 75% topsoil, 25% compost. That would be ideal. This layering on the lower two parts of the lasagna, that saves you money. But make sure, if you're going to do that, that you don't try to save so much money that you kind of shortchange your garden, you've got to have about 8 to 12 inches of high quality soil at the top for your plants to grow. If you're growing deep-rooted vegetables, you'll need to add a few more inches yet. All right, one last tip. If you're going to fill multiple beds, we did just one bed, but if you're going to do multiple ones, consider buying soil in bulk, from a local supplier. If you do that, you can generally get better quality soil for less money compared to the bagged options. But there's always a but, right? There's always a big but. You can save money, like crazy amounts of money. I priced it out. You can get $42 is what it's going to cost to get better soil from a local supplier. And it's going to be like $150 to get that same amount of soil that's not quite as good probably, just in bags. So wow, huge savings. But there's delivery fees, and the delivery fees usually make it price out similarly. So look into that. If you've got multiple beds going, you probably don't want to be hauling 40 to 50, 60 bags around. Just get it delivered. But look into it. Don't forget about delivery. All right, that's the scoop. There's so much more I could say, but that's enough. Hopefully got your interest peaked a little bit, and you've got time. Fall is the perfect time to get your raised bed ready. And if you do it now, get all that soil in there, get everything ready to go. It's going to be set and ready when spring arrives. You're going to just be able to jump right in, and you'll have a ton of fun. You'll be eating tomatoes till you can hardly even stand it anymore. It's that much fun. All right, I know that was a ton to cover, but I hope it gave you the information that you needed, answered some of your questions, and maybe got you ready to jump into this. It's a fun, relatively budget-friendly project, and it's a great family activity to boot. So check it out. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about art in the bathroom. What do you need to do in order to bring real art into your bathroom and have it be tasteful and stay safe? I've got all of that coming up in just a minute. Stick around. And we're back. You're listening to the Repco Light Home Improvement Show, sponsored by Benjamin Moore. And I want to talk about a unique and often overlooked space for art, the bathroom. But before I jump into that, I got to talk about the fact that I was surprised to find that this is a controversial topic that blows my mind. This really can get people amped up. This can trigger people, get them upset. I mean, the world's burning to the ground. But you talk about putting art in the bathroom, and man, the torches and the pitchforks come out. But anyway, I'm going to plow ahead with this topic because I'm fearless, or, because I really don't have a lot of common sense. Either way, let's find out how triggering this really is. I don't believe people are really going to be triggered, not regular people. I'm going to find out, though, for sure. So, the bathroom might not be the first place that you think of when it comes to showcasing or displaying art. But with the right pieces and some considerations, those are both important. With both of those things, it can be a great place to display real art. I'm talking about real art, not just bathroom decor pieces, funny little signs or something like that. I'm talking about actual art, which is already offensive because maybe some people find those funny little signs to be actual art. Art is subjective, so I've already triggered people. Anyway, let's get to it. In order to successfully bring art into the bathroom, the very first thing that you need to do is consider a couple of things: the elements and the materials that you're bringing in. And what I'm getting at here is this: mold and mildew, they thrive in humid environments, and that makes the bathroom a pretty tricky space sometimes for art. Materials like paper and wood, they are particularly vulnerable to mold and mildew. So you want to avoid those materials if possible. And make sure also that you're only installing in your bathroom replaceable art. That means no limited edition prints. It means no, just priceless documents. So the original letters that you've got from George Washington during the Revolutionary War, the copy of the original Constitution of the United States, all of those documents, they're no-goes in the bathroom, right? Shouldn't need to be said, probably doesn't need to be said. But that's my way. I will say it anyway. So don't use those. Don't use original paintings. Don't use vintage posters, things like that. If it's valuable, if it's irreplaceable, if you love it more than life itself, the bathroom might not be the place for it. Canvas prints, on the other hand, they're generally safe for bathrooms, especially those that have a special moisture-resistant coating. Some do. Those would be ideal. in the bathroom. Another consideration when it comes to materials is framing. If you are opting for framed art, you need to consider a couple other things, further things here. First off, consider aluminum or stainless steel frames, as they're not going to rust. Plastic and acrylic frames, those would be good choices too, if you can find ones that work for, your style, your decor, what you're trying to do. Wood frames, they can be a little more problematic. They can work if they're sealed properly, but you do want to make sure that they are sealed properly before you bring them in there. The other materials that I mentioned are going to be better. Now, the last thing to mention when we're talking about framed art and the materials that you're bringing into the bathroom is glazing. Now, glazing is the, how do I describe it? It's the clear protective sheet over framed art. Generally there's two different options. It's going to be glass or it's going to be acrylic. In an ideal situation in a bathroom, you wouldn't use any glazing in the bathroom. That would be the ideal. But if you do use the glazing, make sure that it's acrylic. Glass can trap moisture, but acrylic will actually allow some of that moisture to pass through. And that's going to reduce the risk that moisture builds up inside the frame. All right? That's the first thing. Consider the moisture in the room and plan accordingly with your materials. The second thing to remember is that ventilation is key, absolutely key. So ensure that you've got an exhaust fan installed that's appropriately sized for your bathroom and make sure it's in working order. And of course, don't forget to run it. That's going to save your bathroom from moisture, which is a huge win, and it will also keep your art in great condition as well. All right, next thing, remember scale. Basically what we're getting at here is bathrooms are typically smaller rooms, right? So choose art that fills that space without overpowering it, without overwhelming it. So obviously smaller pieces can work better, but to make this not just a throwaway point, I want to consider the power of color as well. A bright yellow or orange or red can really pack a punch, even in a small format. So just because a piece of art is small doesn't mean that its color impact is going to be diminished enough. So keep all of that in mind. Scale. Keep all of that in mind when you're making your selections. Now, all right. Now we're getting to the really fun stuff. I love this part of this conversation. What about subject matter? What kind of art can you hang in a bathroom? Are there unwritten rules out there? Does all bathroom art need to be spa-themed or calming? No. The beauty of art is its subjectivity, right? Whatever you love can find a home in your bathroom. So if you love abstracts or landscapes, go for it, even in the bathroom. If you want something stark or modern, go for it. If you want portraits in the bathroom, go for it. Dogs playing poker, go for it. Nothing is off the table here, really. But the bathroom should reflect your personality, just like your whole home. But your bathroom, that's your space more than anything else. That should reflect your personality. So whatever you like, go for it. If it's spa-themed and all that you love, well, there you go. It's perfect. Nobody's going to argue with that. All right, let's say you found some art. Where should you place it on the walls? Are there rules that you need to consider, or is any blank space in the bathroom fair game? Well, in this situation, there are rules. It's kind of surprising, but there are rules. Two of them, in fact. I call them Dan's rules of bathroom art displays, and they're brilliant rules. The first one is this. While any blank space is fair game for your art, for the most part, you want to avoid areas directly exposed to water, like above the shower. It's just not smart. Don't put art there. Find another spot. The second rule is this. Think about the subject matter. See, it's possible that the subject matter of the art itself may limit where that art would work in your bathroom. Case in point, a beautiful landscape hung above the toilet might be perfect, beautiful, flawless, wonderful. A portrait of some Victorian gent or lady hung above the toilet might be a little weird. Personally, I know that I would forget that portrait was in there, hanging up, at least in the beginning. And I know my first time getting up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, that would be an experience that I'd never forget. If I managed to live through it, seeing some person hovering in the air over the toilet in the middle of the night, that is not conducive to my health. So think about the subject matter. All right, last thing I'll say about this is remember that art comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes. It's not just limited to framed prints of photos or paintings or stuff like that. Sculpture can add dimension and character to a space without, typically, at least with a lot of materials, without the worry of damage from moisture. So there you go. Art in the bathroom. I don't think it was really all that controversial, right? I think we weathered it like champions. Hopefully it gives you some info so you can bring in some interesting art pieces and make your bathroom even cooler than I'm sure it already is. Anyway, there you go. Time's up. If you want to catch this episode again, you can find it online at repcolite.com. Whatever you do today, make sure paint's a part of it. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I'll see you next week. I'm Dan Hansen. Thanks for listening.